world. So I am here with Victoria Lynden, who has been a long-term mentor and friend of mine for a decade. And she had reached out to me a couple weeks ago about her frustrations with trying to identify a senior living community in the Colorado or Texas markets for a loved one. And instantly, obviously, I replied because I always want to help people in this search. And after we had several discussions, I asked Victoria if I could interview her on camera so that our operators, our owners, our developers could see what we are advocating here that needs to change, not within the customer and resident experience. This is solely focused on the buyer experience. So people like Victoria, who are highly educated, extremely successful, that find this to be incredibly challenging. So thank you, Victoria, for talking with me today.
Thanks, Trace. Great to be here.
So can you just tell me, maybe from your own words, what happened? Where did you start? A little bit about your experience of kind of diving into this world of finding care.
Absolutely. So, I was in a situation that was really not predicted. So my father was in independent living and in his 80s and very satisfied where he was at, kind of a combination of independent and assisted living where they provide several meals. It was a community for seniors. And unfortunately, during this whole situation of the last few months, he became ill and ended up in the hospital. And when he was in the hospital, because it was for a long period of time, being 3 weeks, he was not very ambulatory. And so he had to go to a rehab place. And, in pure transparency. So because of being he became ill because through the isolation and everything, he attempted to kill himself. But his attempt was really more of a cry for help because he told everybody he was going to do it. He called an ambulance before. And, they even said that, he had superficial scratches and took, very few pills. So really it was for his protection to keep him in a hospital and then a rehab place just to get him in a better place mentally, and knowing that he was lonely, he was isolated because of the quarantines, and to do it. But what was unexpected was that they said, okay, he can no longer go back to independent living, that he needed someone to manage his medicine. Although he can move with a walker and do things, I couldn't take him in my home, which was, really made me feel like a failure, right? What am I going to do with, this person that I love, but he can't walk up steps. He had limited range of motions. So they told me that basically I had to find a place for him to live. He has basic Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance, but he didn't have any long-term care insurance. And when I said, okay, what do I do? And they're like, well, you'll have up to 72 hours when he's going to be discharged. And I said, but I don't even know, where to begin. And, I started, even before calling you, looking online, talking to friends who had their parents that moved into senior living and, other type of assisted living care. And they kind of told me their stories and shared with me and said, look, this is not easy. And they gave me names of places. So I started calling, to explain the situation, that I was looking, that I was the person that was responsible for my father's finances. And I needed to understand what the process was, how long does it take? And, I was really kind of shocked that the first reaction was, well, we really need to be talking to your father. And I'm like, he can't talk to you, right now.
Really?
He's the one that needs to be making the decision. And I'm like, he's in the hospital right now and he's confused. So I'm trying to find the best possible options for him. And I must have called 50, 60 different places. And when asking basic questions, they're like, well, we need to know, we can't quote you a price because we don't know his level of care. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? What is he, how are you assessing his level of care? And they're like, well, we don't know until, we need to interview and talk to him. And I'm like, that's fine, but I really need to understand, is it 30 days, before you have availability? Is it 60 days? Do you have a doctor that goes and, does a physical? Do you have, he has all of his medical records. He's been, absolutely cleared by, mental health and psych, that, it was really more of an attention thing than to harm. And I said, so I have all that. And time after time, it was, well, we'll get back to you. And nobody would call me back. And I would call back, and I'd get referred then to someone who, would answer the phone and say, well, I'll have the admission person, or I'll have someone else call you back. And in the meantime, it's very emotional, because I didn't know what to do. I mean, he was like going to become a ward of the state. And, although he certainly, would not by any means be considered affluent, he has plenty of money for his life to be in an assisted care thing. So in calling, what I realize is how much I don't know, right? And you try to research online and ask around, and the questions are different, not only per community, but per city. What is their way of saying, they started asking me questions I didn't even know about. What about his veteran benefits? He was a vet. And I'm like, I don't know. Yes, he was. He fought in the war. And they're like, well, you should research that. And I'm like, can you help me? Do you because they're like, we'll take some of those payments, we can work with those benefits. And I would ask, well, who do I talk to? How do I even find out? Because right now his memory is not so great. So, I can give a social security number, dates that he, would have been, in the service, but do you have a way or someone or a number that I could call? And it was time and time again, no, you need to, do that. And then you can come back to us and then we'll help assess. So in trying to even figure out, even to, this day, I don't really even know how much it will cost to have him, what are the monthly expenses, because without understanding what potential benefits he has, what percent of any type of his insurance, and then how do they look at how much money. And when I asked the questions of like, okay, well, what do you do how do you know, does this last 2 years, 3 years? And it was, I was told a year at a time, you don't know how long your dad will live. Let's try to get him into a place. And then from there, we'll really look at what the options are.
Because you were trying to see how far you could stretch, because you told me, and if I'm wrong, just quote me, he had about a spend down of $250,000.
Yep.
Which is more than enough. And I can tell you that the average person will be in an assisted living for 2 years, right? So I don't know why they weren't being more transparent. Of course, you don't want to say, oh, he's only going to live, but he might move to a different level of care, or could pass, but they could have given you a little more insight. Do you feel, so I'm just curious, how did you feel through all this? Just going through this process, how did it make you feel?
Hopeless. Even when you're asking me now, I feel like I have tears in my eyes, because again, it's something that you would think would not be so difficult. Whether you're moving, into a house and dealing with a mortgage, or getting an apartment or doing it. But I think that for me, it was just, I wasn't prepared for how challenging it would be. I wish that I knew that there was prerequisites to say, before you, even if I say, okay, look, he has $250,000 to spend. I wish I would have understand, like, how long does it take? What is the application process? You have to pay, application fees that are not refundable. There are several places that said we'll take a $3,000, a $4,000, fee.
So you were being told like probably about community fees and rental fees, and you didn't even know what these were.
I didn't know what any of it is. And I said, well, how does this work as far as when he is, accepted into it? So I really, again, from talking to everybody, it was like, look, either they knew someone who was in a home, another relative, a friend of the family. So it made the going into a facility, into a care community, a senior living community, easier. But from my side, like, I didn't even know. And then when they said, I started calling, any place where I knew there was some type of extended family. So whatever state. So then we worked, okay, from Texas, potentially Colorado, and everybody. And then we talked to several facilities, and they're like, okay, that's great. And then right when we were like, okay, when we're going to get ready to know the discharge, which is actually coming up next week, then like, well, we can't take any out-of-state patients, that come in there. And so I had to keep starting
Keep starting over
and over and over. And really it was by the grace of God, Tracy, that when I called you to reach out, that, you had given me, the names of, a senior care assisted living that's here close to me that I had never heard of. And I was calling everywhere that the rehab hospitals told me, were social workers, everyone told me. They had given me a list of 40, and I had maxed out calling those 40s in the first week. And when you helped me, and really to say, call these people, I mean, I am going to tell you, and I'll say it on camera, whatever, but the people, Trace, between your help and Peggy at Belmont, I really was distraught because I did not know where to go. And they had suggested, well, put him in hospice until you find something. But besides being, not a healthy environment for him, it's also what are those costs that just, would burn through his existing, savings, really almost immediately, because insurance wasn't going to cover him, in a hospital care or hospice. Sure. Because he didn't need to be there. So when you hear that for your loved one, you have no other option but put him in a hospice or, type of facility until you can find something. And I was like, well, how long does that be? And it could be 2 months, could be 6 months.
The sad thing is he had enough finances to cover a 4 to 5 year stay. And then we identified, we were texting, he's a veteran, he can get veterans benefits, yes. But I get speechless on some of this because it's frustrating, and I get emotional too because I know you were emotional and I care about you, and I don't think this should be so hard. I'm curious, before Peggy, and I'm so glad, I mean, I love Belmont. They are such a first-class company. But did people in those early calls, like the 40, 50 calls, do you feel they had empathy for you? Did anybody like really say, so Victoria, how you feeling? What's going on? How can I help you? Or was it all this?
Zero. And wow. It's zero. And also when they asked, like, why is he in rehab? And I was very honest because it would show in medical records. It was almost like, no, sorry. You know what? We let us know, how he is in 6 months or a year, and then maybe we'll consider having him. And when I was able to talk to Peggy and Belmont, I mean, it was so compassionate to say, do you know how common this is for people that are, elderly, and, he's almost 90, that, what he needs to be treated for is depression, right? And nobody said that. Everybody they're like, this is a common part of aging. And this is, why the benefits of
right.
Being in a facility that has nurses, because this is a very commonality. It's not the exception. And what I was always made to feel is like, it's kind of like a hot potato. No, we don't want him. But when he gets well, and I was
we'll take him.
We'll take him. But I'm like, he is well. There's nothing that was, on that.
Does that make you think maybe they don't even really understand seniors? Because the reality is, here you are in the business of senior living, that they don't understand the first 40 to 50 people you call that he's depressed because it's COVID, he's been isolated. What do you even know about your very customers? I mean, I think I want you to share, because it made me very emotional when you and I were on the phone. You were telling me about his turnaround. Once he saw that you had a solution for him, the assessment was scheduled, you said he turned a corner, because this is what we're in the business of doing, is changing lives. And because the sales process or the buyer experience is so traumatic, I feel like we miss half the people's lives we could change if it had just been done right. But I don't know if he's still feeling this way, but you'd said he's like had a new grip on life. Like, can you talk a little bit about how that made him feel?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I can't, as much as I try, I can't even imagine. Sorry. I mean, I can't imagine what it is to not know where you're going to go. And he kept saying to me, like, I don't even know why, I should try living when I'm going to end up on the street. Right. And we kept saying, you're not going to end up on the street. You know, we're going to help you. And he's like, I have nowhere to go. And it really, we couldn't even give him, you know, false hope of maybe we'll have something, you know, in a few months, because every single time it was such resistance of, you know, trying to take him in. And it really was, he had the, I think it was by Zoom as well, interview with Peggy in Belmont. And prior to that, you know, he wouldn't get out of bed. He, you know, they had to roll him. He had a, you know, a bed sore, and they had to move him, and he had to get up, and he didn't want to, because he kept saying, I just wish that the Lord would take me, because I have nowhere to go. I'm a burden. I don't do it. And so he really wasn't eating, and he's in a, you know, a physical rehab place that they cannot discharge him until he becomes more mobile. But what was happening is he was becoming more and more depressed because there was nothing to look forward to. So once he spoke, had the interview with, you know, Peggy and the admission people, he, you know, the whole thing was, okay, once you can, you know, walk, you can get out of bed, you can do all these things, you can be discharged, and they would be delighted to have you part of their community. Well, I you know, because we haven't talked, I mean, I'm delighted to share. I talked to his nurse yesterday, and she said he has pep in his step. He is, you know, walking around the hallways, you know, with
Oh my
his
gosh.
walker to make sure that he can move around. He is so excited because he knows he needs to get out of bed, to go to the bathroom, to take a shower, to do all that. And they gave him that encouragement of, you know, basically, we're here, we're a sense of like an extended family. We're going to be here. We're going to match you up with similar interests with people. They, you know, talked about some of the residents that they had there that had been in the service like he had. And it just changed his whole perspective. And so it was,
Felt
you know,
wanted.
because he belongs. And so now he's been pushing. And actually, when I talked to the nurse, you know, yesterday, she's like, he has accelerated. We thought he'd be here a month, and he should be able to be out next week, because he knows every day that the more he walks around and he's doing these laps in his walker and he's doing it, that he can move to his new home. And he keeps telling me, like, okay, well, you can start packing my boxes, and if you want to send over a few at a time over there, you know, so we can get ready. So, you know, I just thought, Tracy, if you had not told me that, you know, as an option and helping me, you know, I'm thinking of, you know, I juggle multiple businesses. I deal with people from all over the world and helping them, you know, with mobility and where they're going and staying. I couldn't even help my own dad, because every time that I was trying to talk to these, you know, potential, you know, new homes for him, it was, first of all, you know, when I would explain the situation, they didn't want to hear, right, to do that. And then it was, I had to go find ways to self-educate myself, because even a lot of the terms and things they were saying to me, I've never heard of, you know.
Wow. Like ADLs, his ADLs. I'm kind of curious because, you know, our audience is a lot of executives. There's like second generation owners who took over the family business. There's a lot of investors who've gotten into senior living because it's a great revenue source, but you're a CEO. So I'm just curious, like, to the people who really, you know, care, there's so many amazing people in senior living that are operators, owners, developers. I don't think they realize how serious this is. I love that you're putting a face to it and you're willing to talk about this, but what advice would you give another CEO? So if you were one of these 40 to 50 companies that, you know, someone like you is calling, and this is someone you love and you're feeling like no one cares or is hearing you. I mean, any advice you would give them?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, to me, it reminds me of preparing your children to go to college, right? That you are part of that decision making of what's in the best interest and how to move forward. That to these communities, you know, we are the ones that are going to guide our parents and say, we think this is a good fit. Because, you know, if I'm talking to someone who doesn't seem to care and it's just another number, or they don't want to know, of course I'm going to say, even out of desperation, like, this is not a good choice for you. So I think for the operators and people who are doing it, they have to understand that it's a family decision. And that, you know, we have to feel equally supported, because I want to be excited for my dad, you know, to say, hey, this next chapter, where you're going, I feel good about it, because I know that you're going to a place where the people care, you know, and you're not going to be ignored, and you're not going to be left alone, and that people know about you, and they embrace you for whatever challenges that lie ahead. I mean, it's a very scary time of age. It's scary for
Sure.
someone that knows that, your parents need to move in that direction. Um, it's very difficult. And, my mother passed away when I was young, and I feel now it's a blessing that I didn't have to deal with, this is very traumatic. And, for my dad, who's 88, of course he cares and he's upset, but I can tell you, for the children, it's more traumatic, right? Because these are, the people that you love that have taken care of you, and you want to do the same, but you have limitations. Again, they've got to be in a safe environment. They've got to be in a loving environment, and you want to put them somewhere where they're going to thrive and not be depressed. So it's really reaching out and saying, and that is what made us made the final decision about, where he's going, because she was calling and checking on me, not even asking me about my dad, but I just, hey, Victoria, I'm checking on you because I know this is tough and I know this is emotional, but you need to know he's going to be okay. And you need to know we have nurses there, right, to look after him. And you do that. And now, I am the biggest, flag waver, for, these people, and, and you
You're a
recommend
raving fan.
to do that, to say, but I will say it time and time again as why, because it was of how are you feeling,
Right.
to do it, because, when I had to pick up the phone, every day and talk to my dad, I would fight back crying because I couldn't tell him anything, and it was like, well, where am I going? When am I moving? What am I doing that? So I think to understand that even the financial commitment, even though, he has let's just say he has a certain amount of fixed income that he has. Well, ultimately, I know that if that needs to be increased, that is my responsibility, right? And I'm going to be much more apt to want to invest into a place that I feel good about than saying, what are the other options? But it has been one of the, largest learning curves and understanding of my entire life. Knowing that and how they assess and what they do, and understanding, one of the questions I'll just tell you was, well, there's up fees for managing medicine. I'm like, okay, well, but there's different fees according to how many medicines and what medicine categories they go into. And I'm like, well, but, he might need, 6 pills now, but he may need 4, the next few months, or it may be to 2. And so all of this of how they're evaluating all these additional charges as well, I think it's tough, because
Too complicated, right?
well, it's something that's fluid, and honestly, even again, my father doesn't live with me. I don't know how many pills he takes. Well, I went to his house. I went through the medicine cabinets. I talked about the doctors, to see how many medicines that he was taking, how long, because then I thought, wow, if you take one less, then you fall into a category that's,
Well, they should have assessed him before they even went into pricing, and
yes,
then went into pricing after they had an understanding of who he was as a person and what his needs were, versus all the what ifs added on top of all of your stress. I can't even imagine, like, and especially with COVID, and we're both business owners, and business, the stuff we're dealing with that, and then to have this fall on your plate. And it just makes me think too, this morning I was just reading all of our industry publications about how occupancy is in the toilet and it's declining and everybody needs move-ins. And I'm like, you're calling during COVID. You don't even care if you can't go tour. You just want somebody to help you now, and you'll move them in if it's the right fit. And we've got people saying, we can't get people to move. I keep saying it's because your people aren't helping people to move, right? Like we have this excuse that before, there's always an excuse. And what I'm seeing with you, and why I'm super passionate, and I know I probably annoy people, but I get angry because you shouldn't have to, what if you didn't know me who's in this business? You would still be chugging along stressed out. Your dad would still be depressed. Who knows where he would have ended up, or you would have sent him to another state. But like the joy it brings me to know, like Peggy was on it, right? And she was emailing us, and Jennifer, and you and I had that conversation. Like, what does the average person do? And our industry is so focused on us and as operators and what we do well. We've got to stop and focus on you, the consumer. And what this is like for you and your dad, like to think he's happy and looking forward to this now is like, this is what we're all about. But we have to teach our site level teams, from the person answering the phone to the admissions and the assessing team, what it's like for someone like you going through this. We need to bring the humanity and the emotion and the struggle and the empathy back. It's just not there. And I know it's no one's intention to make you feel this way. It's because, as I say, it's like the wild, wild west. There's no procedure, infrastructure. We just like answer the phones and do whatever. It's like order taking, but this is a human, that we're talking about.
That's exactly right. And I think even, not even about me, but if even at one point in time, outside of Peggy, if someone would have even said, this must be an incredibly difficult situation for your father or your family, right?
Empathy.
But never,
Aww.
it was right away. Well, I don't know if you're going to tick our boxes, but when you do, come back, right? Or you know what, this could cost anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 a month,
You couldn't get
and,
any of that.
and then it was, and you can go online, right? And it will tell about you. And I was like, I don't have the time to go online, and I've read the basics about it.
Yeah.
I need you to help educate me so that we can make, the right decision and make a decision, rather quickly.
Did
But it
any of
hasn't
those
when
people
it's
follow up with you and call back besides
zero,
Belmont?
zero.
Nobody. So
No,
I want to make
nobody.
that loud and clear. So she called
No one.
40, 50 communities, maybe 60. I know nobody followed up. People did not show empathy. I mean, this is ridiculous. And any thank you notes or cards in the mail?
No.
That's amazing.
No, like I said, and I spent hours and hours. I mean, I would say that I was averaging, at least 6, 7 hours a day, making calls, calling from West Coast, East Coast, everywhere, doing it. And really only, and Tracy, is through your recommendation, where again, Peggy wasn't even calling to check up about my dad. And she would, how are you doing? We're here for you. We're not going anywhere. And then even when I had questions, even when we hadn't, known he's going to be discharged, about, I don't understand what this means. And it was no obligation for us to, go in her direction. She's like, I'm happy to answer any questions, because ultimately you have to make the right decision for your dad.
So
Right?
she was a resource. It wasn't go
Yes.
figure it out.
Yes. And even if that hadn't been the right place for my father, I promise you that if anyone ever asked me, and so many of my friends and peers are my age, where their parents are, I would have said, oh my gosh, you should check out Belmont. You should check out Peggy. You should check out, talk to Tracy and what her company does, because although it may not have been the best resource or facility for my dad, it could be for a lot of other people.
Right.
And I would have just said, this is the most warm, caring place. And that's the impression, right, that I wanted to be left with, to do it. And as you said, factually, to know not one single place called me back, followed up, sent me an email. But I'll tell you, they all sent me emails with their pricing, right? Which was
And you
these.
didn't understand the pricing.
Right.
So it's like,
Say,
what?
it's a
What
matrix.
really?
It was like, someone else would say, here, Victoria, here's the information for your dad. Here's the pricing. And it would have, every single one had different matrices and how they work. And
Yep.
I'm like, I don't know, what this means.
And meantime, you're working, you have children, you've got a life. In addition, we have COVID, we have everything going on. And it's kind of like, here you go. And occupancy right now in our industry sits like at 87%. Like, you think of all the lost revenue, when the reasons came up with Victoria, we're in a mastermind group, and we had a call scheduled to have like a cocktail hour with our group. And she's like, I got to cancel. I got to find a place for my dad. I was like, wait, we can help, and that's how this whole conversation started. But not everybody has a friend who's in senior living. So I think what you don't realize, Victoria, is that you're going to be the instigator for a lot of change. And I get emotional now because I feel like that one person like you speaking the truth, and for those people who are willing to watch this whole video, that really step back and let their egos go and not be defensive. Oh, well, my people do that. Most people don't. We saw 50, 60 people aren't equipped to help you on helping. We do a great job at operations and caring for our residents once they're in the door, but we could be caring for many, many more residents in our space if we just made it easier to buy. I know this year alone, I've helped 4 different families who were in similar situations. I'm always kind of funny about calling to interview them, but you and I know each other so well. I was like, can I interview you? Because I think change starts with education. And this is, even for me, and doing this 20 years and studying sales and relationship building, it's infuriating. I'm sorry, it's embarrassing. But I'm so grateful for like Belmont. We've worked with Belmont for years. That comes from the top down. They have such incredible leadership, great culture, great just company overall. And you felt that
Mm.
all the way through the phone and, you know, email and now and it trickled into your father. And so I want to thank you. I know that we've gone on, but I hope people watch this to the very end because what you've shared is so profound. So thank you, Victoria. And if you're watching this, I really hope that you will just get a notepad out and start to think about what you can do differently. And even more importantly, pick up the phone and be a shopper yourself and go through what Victoria went through. Call 20, 30 properties and you will, I'm guaranteed you will go through the exact same process. So anyways, thank you for your time. And I'm so happy.
Thank you so much for
I'm
your
your
help,
dad.
Tracy. Thank you so much.
Um,